So Tom, I'm sorry I don't have this information for me. How long have you been the public defender here in Omaha?
Well, I started in the office in 1975 as an assistant, and I became chief deputy in 1983, and then I was elected in 1996 to the public defender office. So I've been here for 47 years, and I've been the head of the office since 1997. So.
Wow. And could you give us a little bit of your history growing up,
Sure.
where you're from, and why you went to law school and why you ended up in Omaha of all
Yeah,
places?
sure. Well, there's my dad and grandpa.
Oh
Um, they my they my my family had law enforcement background. My dad was a police officer. My grandfather was a police officer. I never met him. He died when my dad was 10. I had uncle that was police, a lot of friends that were police. So it was always kind of criminal justice discussions in our household. Um, I went to high school in Springfield, and it was during those years that I kind of decided I liked history and government and literature, and I did not like math. I did not like science, and so I kind of figured that maybe law school might be something that would work for me. I went to college in Vermont, St. Michael's College in Vermont. It's a small, at that time, all-male college basically in the suburbs of Burlington, Vermont. Again, I kind of thrived on the history and humanities, and I was an American Studies major. And the head of my department, the American Studies department, was a Midwesterner, and he was trying to help us with our future plans for education. And he had sent several St. Michael's students to Creighton, and they had been very successful students, and made it known to him that send some kids out our way. So he suggested I apply to Creighton. I applied to Suffolk, which was in Boston, University of Maine, and Creighton. And University of Maine was a foolish. Vermont did not have a law school at that time, and the University of Maine was a dumb move on my part because they were going to accept. This was the first year that they'd reopened the law school. And they were going to accept 67 students, 2/3 of whom had to be residents of Maine. So I didn't realize that at the time, but I realized, okay, I'm not going to get in there. I thought I'd end up at Suffolk, and this is all true. I got accepted at Creighton, and I was waiting and didn't hear from Suffolk, so I finally called him. So what's going on? So, well, Princeton Testing Service, who used to be the be-all, end-all on all educational testing, had not sent my transcripts to Suffolk. And it got to the point where I had to either make my deposit at Creighton or I'd lose my spot at Creighton. So I called again, and Suffolk still didn't have my stuff, and I put the money down and sent all my belongings out here. Took my first plane ride in my life, and I landed in Omaha and called my mom to let her know that I'd safely landed. And she said, well, if you want, get on the next plane. You just got accepted at Suffolk in the mail today. And I said, I'm here. I've got an apartment. I've sent, all my belongings out here. So what I'll do is I'll go a year here, and then I'll probably transfer back. And I had a really good freshman year of law school. I did really well in class. I was lucky. I had great teachers at Creighton, and I like I said, I did really well. And I started making acquaintances and friends here. And I decided I liked Creighton enough that I would stay. Still thinking eventually that I'd probably end up back in Massachusetts. my dad wanted me to be a defense lawyer, not a prosecutor. And his plan was, of course, he would then retire, and he would be my investigator, and then he could continue to boss me around. Unfortunately, Dad passed away before I graduated. He died in February of my third year in law school. But I also came to realize that I didn't really know any lawyers in my hometown area. I knew a lot of cops, but I didn't know any lawyers. And I clerked for some law firms, and I became acquainted with a number of lawyers. I attended bar at Mike Fahey had a bar on 19th and Leavenworth.
What was the name?
Fahey's Bar, Fahey's Pub. The building's gone now, but I met a lot as you can well imagine, I met a lot of lawyers at that bar, including members of the public defender's office. And my interest was in criminal law, and I applied, and eventually I got a job that was basically it was a grant fund that started me off. I passed the bar in July, and they started me August 1st on this grant funding. It was $12,500 a year. I'll never forget that. Luckily, there were several departures shortly thereafter, so I got on full time as a employee of Douglas County in September. So I was only on this grant for about a month or so. From there, I got a chance to try cases, which I loved doing and still do. I've always been kind of for the underdog. I'm a Mets fan.
They're not the underdogs this year. Maybe to the Dodgers, but not anybody else.
Yeah, you're right. This year it's been in somewhat of an anomaly, or an aberration, I guess. But that's kind of how I always felt. And honestly, I went to Catholic grade school and Catholic high school, and back then the nuns kind of pounded into you how you're supposed to put yourself second and help poor people, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And while there are some things that were silly that were in Catholic schools back then, that was something that stuck with me, and to this day I firmly believe in. So I never really contemplated any other job. Once I got myself into this office and got to start trying cases, I hoped that I would start here and end here. I'm from that the older generation that you don't change jobs very frequently, and I'm not condemning anyone that does. Don't get me wrong. It's just my makeup is okay. You're here, and I never realized that or I didn't use my common sense and say, okay, I'll stay here until the job's done. Well, the job ain't ever going to be done. Ain't ever going to be done. Right. So I just am real happy here. I've got a wonderful staff of lawyers that I think very highly of, and I think do a great job. And probably one of the things I enjoy the most is being a mentor to the younger lawyers. I have an open door policy, and they're all confident enough in me that they know they can come and ask me a question and know that I'm not going to say, well, that's a stupid question. I'm not going to do that. Now, if they come back and ask me the same question 5 times, I might have to say something about it, but that's a rarity.
How many attorneys have worked, in your office since you've been the public defender? Like, how many attorneys have come through the doors?
Oh,
It's been a lot.
yeah, there's been a large number of lawyers that have come through, and the reasons for departure vary. Some start very young here, they're single, and then they decide to get married and maybe move or some people move back home to where they came from originally. Some people, they get married and have kids, and obviously being in government work isn't you're not going to become a millionaire. So they want to provide for their kids and family, and if an opportunity arises, they'll take it. And my position on that has always been, if it's your career, and when you come to the fork in the road, you want to be the person driving the car, not the one sitting in the back seat. So you make that decision, and I'll support it. And unfortunately, we lose some really good lawyers, and that's just the nature of the beast, I guess.
I guess I was asking in the way of, you've mentored so many people along the way. I wasn't asking in the opposite way, which maybe is there's been a lot of turnover. It's you've touched a lot of people in the community, in the legal community, big names that we know of. It's just been, you've had quite a lot of mentoring opportunities.
Yes, yeah, and there are a lot of alums, shall I call them, that are really really good lawyers, but I knew that when we hired them. I mean, I knew they were going to be good, and if you try to hire the best people, you realize that they're going to get poached probably at some point in time. But that like I said, that's the nature of the beast, and I can live with that. It's always hard when you see someone that is really coming to their own, is really doing great when they leave. It's a blow, but and a lot of these people are really tight. Luckily, they maintain their friendships after they leave. But yeah, I can think of dozens of good lawyers that are out there that started off in here, and I'm really happy for them and proud of them.
So take me back just for a second. You're talking to your cop dad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go to law school,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, you should look at this criminal defense thing. I think you'd be good at it. I think it fits.
Yep.
Is there? I'm in my mind, I'm coming up with a divide in the cop community over a defense side and maybe a prosecution side, or where some of his cop buddies were like, no, he needs to go be a prosecutor. You're leading him wrong here.
There's some truth in that, but policing in Chicopee, Massachusetts in the 50s and 60s is a lot different than it is now. Some of my childhood friends, my dad got them on the police department, and their attitude is a lot different than my dad's. In many occasions back then, it's just the culture change. If they pulled someone over and they had too much to drink, many times what they would do is bring them to the jail, take the keys, and say, call your wife or call your husband and have them come and get you. If they puked on their shoe or smacked one of the cops, that's a different story. But policing was a lot different. That would not be accepted today, and probably justifiably so. But everyone knew each other. It wasn't a situation where they were trying to get as many notches in their belt as they could. It just was a different culture. That isn't to say that there were some police back then that were friends with my dad that were much more like they are today. When I pick juries, a lot of times someone will say my husband's a police officer or my dad was a police officer. And I said, well, did they ever talk about cases? And so many times they say, oh no, you never talk about cases. That's all they talked about. When I would be sitting, in the kitchen, my dad would be sitting there with 3 or 4 other cops, drinking beer and having shots, and that's all he talked about was what they did. And I always kind of internally grin when they say they never talk about it. I don't think that has changed that much. People just don't want to admit that. Yeah, that's all they talk about. But he was friends with a couple of defense lawyers that I really didn't know about until I was in law school. And I think they may have had some influence with him. He was also very good friends with the district attorney back there, who was he was kind of an icon, and you know things didn't turn out very well for him. There was a lot of organized crime in Springfield, and sometimes police and prosecutors got you know, entangled in some of those things. And I remember when he resigned, I was floored. I thought, this guy was on a pedestal to pretty much everybody, and he got caught up in it. Probably in his later years, not forever, but it's the defense lawyers that my dad knew, I think, probably had some influence with him in saying, hey, this is a proud profession to be a defense lawyer, and there's nothing wrong with it. And like I said, my dad, I don't think he ever fired his service revolver ever, except at the range when you had to do it. We didn't have a lot of, there weren't any gangs, and there were hoods back then. And I don't mean neighborhoods. I mean guys that were called hoods. Right. But there was none of this organized gang stuff. He was involved in investigating a couple of murders. He ended his days as a lieutenant until he got really sick. He was in the detective bureau, and loved it. And like I said, talked about it all the time. But I never got the impression that he thought even the people who committed some serious crimes were all Jack the Ripper. He kind of recognized that there was a lot more screw-ups than a-holes.
So since he was a detective and we talk about the cases, investigating, getting the details, getting the storylines. I mean, that was something that you talked about at home, and that certainly has helped what you do now, right?
Yeah, one story I like to tell a lot is when Miranda first came out. That was when my dad was in detective bureau, and I remember him freaking out about it at first, and they were talking about sometimes what they would do is they'd put the suspect over in a corner and they'd walk away from him and say, "Okay, I have the right to remain silent. Yeah, anything they can be, and that we said it." But they quickly realized that there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. It did not interfere with their investigation. In many respects, it made them better cops. And I would say within a year or two of Miranda coming down, it was accepted procedure, and it wasn't like, well, why do we have to do this BS? I think that was the initial knee-jerk reaction. So those are the kind of stories that I grew up with, listening to them talk. Usually, me overhearing them more than me being involved in them. Although as I got into high school, I did get involved in the discussions, and those were turbulent years with the Vietnam War going on and a lot of protests and I remember one time when Muhammad Ali was still Cassius Clay. He was fighting Sonny Liston in Lewiston, Maine, and he did his training in Chicopee. And he had to have police, when he was doing his road work and stuff, they had police driving with him. And initially, Dad was saying, "Oh, this guy's a jerk. He's, his mouth off and stuff." Then they met him and said, "Well, the guy's a great guy. He bought us all sorts of, food and treated us great." I said, "Yeah, Dad. See, first impressions, or when you haven't even met someone, can give you the wrong." And he came to realize that just because the guy was an activist didn't mean that he was a bad person. And as a matter of fact, found out that he was a good guy. He liked him. And most of the cops, I think, felt that way initially, and he turned them all around. I mean, those are kind of things that kind of stick with me. life lessons that you know you can apply even to this day.
Yeah, yeah. Be open to empathy and understanding others.
Yep.
May have a different opinion.
Yep.
You said you had some great professors at Creighton Law.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, give me some highlights.
Uh,
Favorites.
oh, Mike Fenner was terrific. He really cared about the students. Was always available to after class to talk to. He had one of his classmates who was a really good friend of his was named Ralston. I can't remember his first name, but I think Richard. He ended up becoming a federal magistrate in Kansas City. They went to, I think, UMKC Law School. Right. And so I had Fenner for con law, and I had Ralston for civil pro. I had Pat Mullen for torts, and some people didn't like him. I loved him. I thought he was great. His daughter works here, and is a terrific lawyer, by the way. I had Doc Shagru. Everybody knows Doc Shagru, and probably everyone in my era had him for some class. Those guys were my first exposure to law school. I was so lucky to have them because they were all really, really good and really gave a damn about the students. Like I said, I was very lucky to have them, and it made me a better student, and that's why I was successful. I wasn't as successful in my second and third year. I started clerking and probably didn't had my priorities a little screwed up. I spent too much time working in the law firms and not as much on my studies. Plus, the first year I didn't know anybody out here, so I studied all the time. But those teachers were very inspirational to me, and I'm indebted to them for showing me how interesting law school was and how important it was, and that yes, you can succeed, you can do this.
Um, for the record, can you give me some stats on the breadth and scope of what this office does? I know it's stuff we could probably read about online, but how many cases are you guys dealing with?
Yeah, we keep stats. I'm not going to say that they're 1,000% accurate, but they're pretty accurate. Over the last, I'll say last 5 or 6 years, I'd say on an average, we have about 10,000, give or take, misdemeanors, about 3,500 to 4,000 felonies. We have the numbers in juvenile court are a little bit more difficult to keep because they keep the cases open. It's like in a felony or misdemeanor, open, close, and so those are a little bit more difficult. But we represent people, kids that are charged with crimes in juvenile court and delinquencies, and then we also represent parents on 3As where they're in danger of losing their parental rights. We also represent clients who are subject to incarceration for failure to pay child support and contempts. We represent people who are subject to involuntary hospitalization through the Board of Mental Health. And we have SOCA cases, which are sex offenders who don't get released upon their completion. They get committed. It's a Sex Offender Commitment Act. And so after you complete your sentence, the Nebraska statute recently, in the last 10 years or so, have allowed the state to pursue further confinement, and what they do is they put them in the Norfolk Regional Center. It's kind of like a commitment, it's based on mental health, allegedly.
With regular reviews, I assume.
They have annual reviews, yeah, and it's it's a struggle. That a lot of those are kind of BMH situations, and a lot, frankly, a lot of them are just getting warehoused.
What sort of numbers are we talking for that?
Oh, in the 20s probably. Um, the way judges are dealing out sentences, a lot of times people aren't getting out, so they don't have to. They don't have to go to the Sex Offender Commitment Act. They just
Right.
kind of sit in prison and rot.
Right.
And I say that cynically.
Right. Uh, the and you have, is it about 50 attorneys?
About 50. Well, we're at full strength. We'll have 56. We're shorthanded right now. We've had some departures, as I was making mention of. We've got several openings that we're having a little trouble, honestly, filling because the market is different now than it was just 5-6 years ago.
Yeah. And then 56 attorneys, support staff level, is it maybe half that?
We have about we have 4 investigators, we have 1 trial assistant, and we have about probably 10 or 12 secretaries, for lack of a better term. We have an office manager, and she does a hell of a job keeping all the books and numbers and payroll and all of that, so I don't have to mess with that. So she's a godsend, and she's terrific at the job. She's been here for quite a while. So we're in the process of recognizing we need more trial assistants. We have part-time law clerks, but during the school year, their hours are pretty minimal. And I've told them, don't make the same mistake I did. Keep your grades up, so when you get out of law school, you have some options on where to go. And they heed that. And during the summer and during the holidays, we have I think 8 law clerks, and they're full time at that for those months. And hopefully we can hire some of them. The devil you know versus the devil you don't, and they can hit the ground running because they know how the place operates. And I prefer, in most cases, to hire new lawyers so we can teach them our way of doing things.
Easier than unteaching them and then teaching them.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's a little more difficult. If you get someone from private practice or someone from another PD's office, but people do things differently, and I'm not saying we're right and they're wrong. It's just different. I tell a lot of lateral hires that this is mud wrestling here. I'm telling you. So if you think you're going to put on a powdered wig and go down to the courthouse and be treated that way, you're sadly mistaken. This is mud wrestling here, Douglas County.
And I mean, to that point, I'll call you guys David. Goliath is city attorney and Douglas County Attorney's Office. They have probably double the numbers.
The city prosecutor's office does not. They don't have. I want to say maybe 12, 15. County attorney's office, on the other hand, they've got a lot more lawyers than us. I'd say 10 or 12 more. In fairness to Don and their office, they also represent people who are charged with crimes that have privately retained lawyers too.
Right.
So, there's justification for the difference in numbers. I will say that I always kind of preach to the lawyers when they come in. I say, I don't know how anyone can do this in 40 hours a week. I don't know how you can do this. And I used to preach that when all of the evidence was basically written in police reports. Now, video, body cam, all the witnesses in big cases are being interviewed and recorded. So the time consumption for trial prep and motion prep is way more difficult than it was when I was doing this initially. it can be overwhelming. And we need to hire some more support staff people, maybe some more investigators, definitely more trial assistants who are kind of paralegally type things. The one we have is, I don't know what I'd do without her. She is top notch and takes on, way too much. And she helps me with every case I have, and she also helps a lot of other lawyers that are doing serious crimes. And she's being stretched way too thin, so we're going to have to get and train some more trial assistants to keep up with the workload. I don't want people leaving because they're overwhelmed, and that's becoming a danger now.
I like to get into policy here. So y'all are paid for by the county budget,
That's correct.
and do they get an allocation from the state government, or is it all county taxable income that then, or county taxes that pays for public defenders, or do they get some help from state funds?
No, it is totally county funded. Our office.
County commissioners are the ones that we.
Yes, every year we go and do the budget dance with the county commissioners, and I will say that in my experience they have been very, very accommodating to both our office and the county attorney's office when we go and explain why we need more help and can show them. They've been good about it. We were too far behind some other comparable counties, or even not comparable. Lancaster, Sarpy, our starting pay was significantly less than theirs, and Don and I finally got together and said we got to do something about this because we're losing people, and we made a showing to the county commissioners, and they allowed us to bump the salaries up to be competitive with Lancaster and Sarpy and Council Bluffs. So it's an ongoing battle. You can fall behind really quickly. Our starting pay now it's like 69, and I just saw on our public defender listserv that I want to say Buffalo County was listing and said starting salary 78.
I just heard Denver 100 for the PDs.
Yep. That there's so many different structures of public defenders offices across the country. There's statewide. I think Colorado is statewide. So they have a structure on how they do their hiring and how they are managed. There's no perfect way to do it. Doing it as an elected office isn't perfect either. My first time I ran against a opponent who basically ran ads that say, I'm going to defend the public. And I think he should have got disbarred, to be honest with you, for making comments like that. Yeah. Kind of misleading, that he was saying that liberal Tom Riley, he's dangerous to your family. That was on a TV ad. My kids would come home in tears saying, this kid at school is saying you're dangerous. So he would say, Riley's against the death penalty. Well, duh. I'm a public defender. So you're gonna.
Are you for the public?
You're gonna represent people and say I'm in favor of giving the death penalty. It was just asinine. The dynamics of what we have to do is different. To me, the most important thing is to not have a public defender's office overseen by judges. Some states, the judges appoint the head public defender. Yes. And I think that's really bad because, if you give the judge a hard time, make them, do a lot of work, they're going to say, screw this, and get rid of you. And recently in Oregon, the state Supreme Court fired the public defender because he was making them do things that defense lawyers should be doing. Yeah. Well, so it's in systems like that. I just think it's better. I think the feds do it that way. I think the Eighth Circuit determines who the federal public defender is here, and you can ask Dave Stickman. I think that's how it works. And far be it from me to criticize the work of the federal defenders, because most of them used to work here. Not Dave, but they pay a lot better than we do here. And I know most of the lawyers over there, and they're really, really good lawyers. And Dave is a good advocate, and probably is able to convince the judges on the Eighth Circuit how important it is to be zealous defenders, and good for him. But as I gave you an example or two, some places aren't quite like that, and it's
And certainly in today's day and age, it seems like you can offend somebody for doing your job, and if they have the levers to kick you out, thin-skinned on the whole thing. Wow.
Yeah, that's scary.
So any feathers in your cap over the years that you really are proud of, either like a change to the laws of the state, or the practice of criminal defense, or even just a few case highlights that you want to throw out there?
Okay, I will tell you that when I'm asked that question, it's an easy answer for me. When the U.S. Supreme Court said that you can't give a juvenile life without parole if that's the only option, and the Nebraska Supreme Court made it retroactive. This office had represented, I believe, 13 offenders who were doing life in prison for offenses that occurred prior to their 18th birthday. Now, you may or may not recall that that didn't sit well with some attorneys general across the country. And matter of fact, in Iowa, they convinced the governor, who has the pardon and commutation powers, to commute all of the lifers' sentences to 150 years, thereby getting around.
That's a commute right there.
Yeah, so they aren't doing life anymore, and they're screwed. Well, I got wind that the pardons board here, consisting of the governor, the AG, and the Secretary of State, and it was the AG that was the moving party at the time, was going to do the same thing. They were going to meet and commute everyone's sentence to 150 years. Well, I heard about that, and I filed a request for an injunction precluding them from meeting, and basically then stopping them from doing that. And much to my everlasting surprise and joy, Judge Otepka granted it. As a result, all 13 of those guys got resentenced, and 6 of them have been released, and not one of them has reoffended. And I stay in contact with them. They are all employed or old enough to be retired, for lack of a better term. Like I said, none of them have reoffended. It's the proudest moment was getting that injunction to stop what I thought would have been a terrible injustice, and then going through the resentencings. I wasn't successful in getting all of them out. Some of them still have some pretty hefty numbers to deal with, but getting 6 of them that would still be languishing in prison is something I'm proud of. Now, a lot of people will say, why would you be proud of getting murderers out of prison? And the answer to that is because all of the science, which is now indisputable, says that the adolescent brain is not fully developed until age 25. And the U.S. Supreme Court basically said children are different and have to be treated differently. And as a result, like I said, some of them who did some pretty hefty numbers, but have been released, and they're productive members of society. I'm very confident that they do not pose any risk to the public. As a matter of fact, earlier this week, I was asked by a group of lifers at NSP to come and speak on that very issue, because some states' courts have extended it beyond 17. There's one that's 18, one that's 19, one that's 21. So I went down to Penn, and there were several senators there, and the topic was the brain development and what legislatively or in court can we do to further this. And I would say there were about 40 lifers sitting in that room.
That would maybe be within that band, do you think?
That would what?
Would be within that band?
Well, I said to him, okay, after I gave my opening remarks about 25, I said, how many of you guys are in here for an offense that occurred prior to your 25th birthday? I would say 90+%. And I mean, I saw guys in there. I'm 72 years old, and I saw guys in there that are older than me, in wheelchairs, in using canes or having trouble getting around. And I said, man, these folks pose absolutely no danger to society. But then I think they've been in there for 30, 40, 50 years. They have no one. If we were to let them out of prison tomorrow, they'd be living under a bridge somewhere. And when I was driving back from Lincoln, my mind drifts and thinks about these things. And, many states, even for first-degree murder, the penalty is something to life, not life.
Right.
It gives the judge some opportunity to, if a person could show that they're deserving of parole, that they have hope. I mean, many of these guys that I just told you about that are out now, 15 years ago had no hope, but they didn't give up hope. It's an amazing. One guy had been there for 40 years and had one write-up in 40 years. And in prison, they write you up if you don't have your shoes tied, if you have your shirt untucked. I mean, literally one write-up. These guys prove the science is accurate because they did some. Not one of them said they were innocent. Not one of the people I represented said they were not involved. Now, a couple of them were down there on felony murder as an accomplice and are not, we're not the shooter, but they still got a life sentence. That ain't right. So I'm hoping that as time goes on, there'll be some legislative changes on the felony murder rule that would make some accommodation for the person who didn't do the actual killing, and you could show that maybe didn't even know that the person that went in to rob the store was even armed. They maybe planned they were going to steal something, but that doesn't mean that they knew there was going to be a shooting. So those are the kind of things that I still look forward to trying to remedy. Like I said, I really wish that we could have done some criminal justice reform in the last session. I was on a committee that was called by the governor, by Steve Lathrop, and Chief Justice Heavican. Did all sorts of work on it, proposed a bill, and the police and the County Attorneys Association depth charged it.
Did it make it to the floor?
Did make it to the floor. Lathrop got it to the floor, but he couldn't get the votes, and they filibustered it. So it was disappointing, and I know I've known Steve for my whole professional career pretty much. He's a little younger than me, and a lot smarter than me, but I've never seen him so disappointed and disheartened as to how that all shook out, and I share his disappointment. They had all sorts of data and information, and it just the legislature is very, very. The County Attorneys Association and the police associations have a lot of slack with the legislators, and if they're opposed to something, it's a steep hill to climb to get there. Now, we'll see what happens with this upcoming election to see if we can get some more people. Unfortunately, Steve has opted not to run for re-election, and he was a leader on this. But I don't blame him. I'm not mad at him. He put his heart and soul into this effort. And sometimes you throw your hands up and say, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
But
Hopefully it finds a new champion.
yeah,
Well, there's some, Terrell McKinney down there, John Kavanaugh's down there, John's an alum of our office. And we're losing, Morfeld. We're losing Patty Pansing Brooks. We're losing McAllister. So there's some people that we're losing that were definitely on board on some of these. I'm not saying that they were all on board on every single point, but by and large they were in favor of some of the criminal justice reform that we were proposing. So maybe we can. There'll be a new governor, and there'll be a number of new legislators, and maybe we can convince some of them that these proposals that we're making in the legislation are not going to sacrifice the public safety. Because that's understandably that's the issue to them. I get it. So it's on us to convince them that these measures are not going to let Jack the Ripper out onto the street.
But as we get more information, we understand better.
Yeah.
Humans
Yeah.
and everything like
Yeah.
that, and how they function. Maybe we can do this better.
Yeah, maybe with some new blood in there, and maybe a fresh approach. With people that don't have predisposed ideas already on it. Maybe we can get somewhere with it. We'll see.
So so back to the mentoring. What are some gems, some Tom Riley gems that you're telling these young attorneys? What are some tips, some big picture tips, maybe some small picture tips when it comes down to how to even do something in this person's courtroom, but more generally how to be a good attorney out there. For the people who aren't in your office who want to know what's the secret sauce that Tom Riley's throwing.
It's not really rocket science. I have a couple. When we have office meetings, the lawyers that have been here for 25 years say, "Oh, I know what Riley's going to say." But I'll tell them things like, as a defense lawyer, we can't control a hell of a lot. There's one thing we can control, and that is how prepared we are. We can get to the point where the best they can do is tie us on preparation. And I guarantee you that if you work really hard, you frequently will be able to out-prepare your opposition. And again, that's no slam on opposing counsel. I'm just saying that that's the mindset you have to have, is I'm not going to let my opponent outwork me, period, end of story. And if that means I have to stay here till 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night on some occasion, so be it. Do it, because that's how you succeed. I tell them that being in a public defender's office, you have to deal with peaks and valleys. You know, the elation that you feel when you have a successful outcome of a not guilty verdict, or a really good sentence that you were worried was going to go south. That really makes you feel good. And then there's other times when you're going to get kicked in the teeth, shall we say, and you're going to find yourself questioning what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you can't let that happen. When you get into one of those valleys and you find yourself struggling, that's when you want to come and talk to me, and we'll talk through what the problems are, and you know, get you to the point where you're not in that low valley. You know, obviously, I tell them things like, if you have a motion to suppress, don't have the hearing and then do the research. Do the research first. Now, obviously, you never know for sure what someone's going to testify about, but you can read the cases that are germane to the issue. So when you are asking questions, you're covering the points that need to be covered, because, you know, so many times that if you do it the opposite way, you do the examination or cross-examination, and then you read the case and say, oh, damn, I should have asked this question because that's important to the court. So, you know, I again, that goes to the preparation, but it's a technique that I think maybe is somewhat counterintuitive. You might think, well, geez, I don't know what they're going to say. How can you research this thing until after the hearing occurs? Well, for the most part, I agree with you. You don't want to write your brief until after the hearing, but you want to do your research so you know what points you have to make and what you know, pitfalls there are that you need to avoid, or hurdles, whatever. You know, I tell people trust their gut. That's really, really important. You know, I tell people when you're getting ready for a trial, you have to say, okay, if this happens, here's what I'm going to do. If this happens, here are the options that I have, and think them through, and be ready to go with them, not knowing which one is going to be best until you are in the courtroom and, you know, have kind of sized up the jury, sized up the judge. You know, I tell them you can get as pissed off or as angry as you want at the opponent or the court, but don't be disrespectful to either opposing counsel or the judge. You can come back down here afterwards, throw something on the wall, and cuss your to the high heavens. And I'm not going to get mad at you for that, but do not, because that's a life sentence. If you show disrespect to a judge or to an opposing counsel or lie to them, you know, you're done with them. And I the same way. If I have a opposing counsel that tries to play cute with me, that stays right here and it doesn't go away. You know, I think that I always try to tell people the most important thing in this office is the client. Period. End of story. And it's really difficult because many of our clients have a combination of poverty, lack of education, distrust for us, distrust for the system, substance abuse issues, mental health issues, anger issues, and you just have to realize that that's going to be a significant portion of our clientele having one or more of those traits. You have to engender the trust. You have to, you know, really work hard to get the trust of the clients, because we're not their lawyer of choice. You know, that no one likes to be called a public pretender. Yeah, it rankles me when people say it. You know, I tell them, when you're talking to the client, you have to make 1,000% sure that you have communicated to them what you want. Words matter. Sorry. Words matter, and I give them all as an example. Let's say that you have a guy that's out on bond. He's going to get sentenced for DUI or burglary or something, and he calls you up and says, "What am I going to get when I go to court? What's my sentence going to be?" Well, many times you don't know. So I say, don't say, "Well, I can't tell you," because how are they going to interpret that? They're going to say, "You know, but you have these secret rules, and you can't tell me what it is." So that's a kind of a silly example, but the point is you have to tell them, "I'm going to advocate for you, and I'm going to hope that we can keep you out of jail, or I'm going to hope for a low sentence, but I don't know what the judge is going to do, and we're not going to know until we get in there." So like I say, words really do matter, and it can make a difference on how the client views the lawyer and how candid they'll be in our interviews with them. I tell them it's important to maintain a line of contact with the client, and when you have a heavy caseload, it becomes difficult to spend the amount of time with clients that you would like to. So you have to, when you do spend time with them, make sure it counts. Make sure that you go over there with a plan if you're going to the jail, and say, "Here's the things I want to talk about," and try to get through them. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes the client doesn't want to hear it. But I said, don't lie to them. Don't tell them you're going to be able to do something that you can't do, and don't tell them that they're screwed, either. You have to be realistic with them, but you don't say, "Well, you're going to get life in prison." I mean, or "We're not going to win this case, so you might as well plead." Those are non-starters for me. I mean, at some point in time, obviously you have to tell the client, the evidence in this case is not favorable to us, and the state has offered this kind of a plea bargain. It's up to you to take it or not take it. And you ask me any question you want as to what I think, whether you should or shouldn't, or what the factors are you should consider. But ultimately, it's you that has to make that call. Because if you are not satisfied that that's as good as it's going to get, then we'll keep trying. We'll go to Plan B. So those are kind of in a nutshell the broad parameters of the things that I try to talk to them about. When they come in with a specific question about a specific case, thank God for Westlaw, and we'll sit here and talk about the issues, and I'll say, go back and I'll do some research, you do some research, and let's see if we come up with the same stuff. I've been around the horn enough to know what some of the easy answers are, and where to look. Judge Burns, Tim Burns, who used to be was a longtime lawyer in this office. He's the smartest guy in the courthouse, as far as I'm concerned. No disrespect to the other judges or anyone else, but when the lawyers would go in and talk to him and say, "Oh, that's State versus Jones," and he'd pull out his file cabinet and go Xerox this case. This is right on point. I mean, he had that kind of grasp of the law, and yeah, he's my friend, but I'm not exaggerating. This guy is just really, really smart, and he knows the law, and he's a terrific judge. Those are the kind of things that we discuss most frequently.
So I'm going to give you a chance to clear up some public misconceptions that are out there, giving you the mic, giving you the ability to say, "This isn't true." People say this isn't true. I'm sure you got a list. I don't have the list, but tell me some misconceptions and clear them up for it.
Okay, well, one of them that is always somewhat confounding to me is the clients who are so distrustful and say, "Well, you get paid no matter what happens." I said, well, so does the private lawyer. This isn't on a contingency fee like plaintiff's law. If you go to hire a private lawyer, they're going to say, here's what it's going to cost you, at least to start with. And it's not, they don't give it back to you if they lose or if you aren't satisfied with the verdict. So, yeah, we do get paid no matter what happens, but so do they. So it does not change what we do. Public defenders are overworked and underpaid. That's an exaggeration. I used to go to a lot of these national conferences, and sometimes they just were wine fests. Come on, just strap it on and let's go. And maybe I'm a little bit too much on that side. Do I think that our lawyers deserve to be adequately paid? Absolutely. Do I think they are? Not quite, but it's not like this where we're getting totally screwed. That's not true in some places. I had a lawyer that came from Miami's public defender's office, and we gave him what we thought was a reasonable offer, and it was a huge raise from what he was making in Miami.
Miami, where it's so expensive to live. Huh?
Yeah. So to say that it isn't true is inaccurate, because in some places it is, and most of it is south of the Mason-Dixon line. To be honest with you, some states don't even have public defenders; they have just court-appointed lawyers, and a lot of times, we'll get examples of some, this court-appointed lawyer was caught sleeping during the trial, and you read the case and goddamn, that's what happened. But it was some knucklehead that the judge in Texas appointed, who was his pal, and really didn't give a darn about whether the guy won or lost. So some of those horror stories are explainable if we were given the opportunity to explain them. The caseload is always a challenge. To say overworked maybe isn't the term I would use, but there's a lot of work to be done, and it can be overwhelming at times. To be honest with you, when I've won a big case, won a homicide, and the guy had been in jail for a while, and they're so thankful and say, "Man, can I give you some money, or can I buy you something, or what?" I say, the best thing you can do for me is to go back to your community and say, the public defender represented me and I won, and they do a hell of a job.
Yeah.
I say, that's what I want.
Public confidence, yeah.
Yes, I want you to tell your community, whether it be North Omaha, West Omaha, South Omaha, primarily North and South, where the majority of our clients come from, that no, we're not a bunch of hacks. We do care, and we do our best, and that you'll get a zealous defense from this office, and in the right case, you'll go home. I know that some people have actually done that, because I've heard back from some of them, or sometimes you go into a grocery store or Walmart or Target or whatever and say, "Hey, Mr. Riley, do you remember me?"
Give me the facts of the case, I'll remember it.
Or they'll say, sometimes when they say their name. And I don't want you to go away thinking that every client that I've ever had or everyone here thinks that we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. But I have no hesitance in saying that the lawyers in this office do care and do want. I've seen way too many people coming down after court in tears, and I'm talking about people with law degrees, not just families. There are some really, really difficult things that we have to do to tell, when a 17-year-old kid gets convicted of a homicide and is going to go for a long time, and the mom and dad or siblings we bring them into the conference room, and it's really difficult. They're in tears. They're heartbroken in many cases. We're disappointed. That stuff really is difficult, and it's one of the reasons some people leave, because I can't keep doing this. It's breaking my heart, you know.
And that's tough, right? Because you need to have emotion and empathy, and you need to feel all those things.
Yeah.
But you can't let it control you and drag you down. That's a tough balance, and I think attorneys always deal with that.
Oh, I think so. I do not think a lot of what I'm talking about is unique to this place, with a couple of obvious exceptions. You know, a lot of what we're talking about is actually applies to the practice itself. You know, I mean, I'm sure some of the things I'm telling you, Don Klein tells his people pretty much the same thing. And I would imagine some of the larger law firms, when they have their meetings, they're told a lot of the same stuff. I mean, I can't you know, take credit for a lot of the terms, you know, about, you know, trust your guts. I mean, you know, things like that. They're truisms, but they're true.
Right.
And it's sometimes these things need to be said. I mean, we just had a case with two of our lawyers who worked their rear ends off, and the kid was charged with first-degree murder, and he got convicted of second, and the lawyers are very disappointed. And I said to them, I've been in that seat. I know how it feels. And telling you that you did a great job and worked really hard may not make you feel more comfortable, but it needs to be said. And, you know, I think, you know, upon reflection tomorrow or the day after, they'll recognize, yeah, that I did do the best I can. I'm not happy, and I'm going to learn from these things that happened in that case. But you know, that's another thing I tell everybody is I've been here for 47 years, and I still learn stuff all the time. You know, cases now, especially the serious ones, are involving you know, all sorts of scientific forensics. You got DNA, which is constantly evolving, and you know, you have to have some grasp of it if you're going to cross-examine their witness. You know, one of the good things about this office is that I don't have to go to the judge and say, "Can you give me some money to hire an expert?" I can just hire him.
Right.
You know, I have a budget that has enough money in it that I can hire. So if I have a DNA case, I have an expert who's, believe it or not, in Scotland. He's dynamite, and we've used him. He's an absolute genius. He's a wonderful man. He did free video seminars for our office to give us the basics on how this probabilistic genotyping works. And anytime we have a question, he emails back to us. You know, I've had cases where I've hired gunshot residue experts. You know, there, everything has come into question now. Some of the things that used to be thought to be you know, irrefutable, like fingerprints and ballistics. There's a lot of studies out there now saying, "Hey, well, slow down." So it's a challenge, but it's a challenge. I wish I was 30 years younger so I could keep doing this, because you know, it's going to keep developing, and it's hard, but it's fun. And you know, I have a handful of lawyers that kind of feel the same way about this, and you know, they're eager to learn about these forensics, and eager to challenge them in court, whether it be a Daubert hearing or just by hiring an expert to come in and refute what they're saying, or just learning how to cross-examine. You know, we can use them as consultants as well as witnesses. You know, so you know, that's kind of exciting, and it keeps you motivated. Um, so there's a lot of things that have happened that are helpful. I mean, just the use of body cams, or the use of video interviews. When I first started, police officer got up on the witness stand and said, "Here's what I told the defendant," and he said A, B, C, D, E. And my client's whispering, "I didn't tell him that." And you'd say to yourself, well, who's the judge going to believe, the cop or the crook? And it got to the point where I had one trial that the officer said the defendant confessed to it, and the defendant got on the witness stand and said, "No, I didn't." And the jury found him not guilty. And I still have the news article. Basically said, if they don't start recording these things, they're going to start losing these cases, because why should we? What the defendant said is just as reasonable as what the cop said. So as a result, they started videotaping all these things. So no more of that BS. If the cop says something and the defendant says, "I didn't say that," we'll say, "Well, let's watch the video and see." Same with body cam. If a police officer says, "Well, we stopped the car because he changed lanes or he wavered into," well, the cruiser cams and the body cams can say, "Well, wait a minute, that's not true," or "Yes, it is true," and you can show to the client and say, "Okay, here's what we're up against. So let's."
Wow, that CGI is really good. No, that's actually the.
Yeah.
Tough question. Do you go home and watch Dateline or 48 Hours?
I hate them. I absolutely hate those shows. I watched a couple of times, and they just irritate the hell out of me. I can't stand it. I think the people that are doing the interviews are so biased against us, our side. They're condescending. They're patronizing. It's just awful. No, I don't. I put on. I'm a early to bed but wake up early.
Yeah.
And everyone in the office can tell you, I always say I like to watch old cowboy movies. So I'll watch those old black and white Gene Autry or Tex Ritter or whoever, and they're kind of brainless. You can sit there and watch it and not have to worry about it, or get pissed off when you're watching it.
Judge Troy, I believe he's also a big fan of the Western.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I'll sit there and watch Have Gun Will Travel or Gunsmoke, and I'll say to these kids, "Yeah, I was watching Gunsmoke." What? The other day I was telling them, when I was in college, my senior year, we got to vote on who we wanted to be our commencement speaker, and Groucho Marx won. I was talking to 5 people, and they said, "Who's Groucho Marx?" I said, "You don't know who Groucho Marx is? You ever heard of the Marx Brothers?" "No." I said, "Google it."
Exactly.
He didn't, by the way, even though he won, the administration said no.
Oh, really? They nixed it?
They nixed it. You know who ended up getting? Ted Kennedy,
No.
which wasn't bad. It was 1972, and so it was after both JFK and RFK had been murdered, and we had to. It was outdoors in Burlington, Vermont. It was an absolutely beautiful day in May, and there were guards on all the dorms everywhere with rifles. We had to go through a metal detector to get our diploma. But yeah, he gave a pretty rousing speech. He got there because one of the students in my class was from Boston and was fairly connected to Democratic politics, and his dad got Ted to okay it. This was before Chappaquiddick and stuff, so he wasn't.
Yeah, I was trying to think in my mind.
Yeah, yes, it was before Chappaquiddick, and he was viewed pretty favorably by especially New England Democrats. I remember it when he gave the speech. Nixon was the president and had just gone over to Red China for the first visit, and Ted Kennedy gets there. So President Nixon is over in Red China. He can have Red China. I'll take Winooski, Vermont.
Good line.
It was great. It was great. He got a big cheer out of that. You know.
When was the last time you had an opponent for your
96. My first year was that opponent I told you about, was Ron Staskowitz.
Yeah.
And since then I haven't. Now, my predecessor first ran in 76 and never had an opponent. And, I think in 96 he kind of smelled that someone was going to run, and he said, by then I had been kind of the face of the office. His main thing was budget and administration, and he let me pretty much run the office, and I did all the murder cases. And so he said, "Why don't you take over, and I'll be chief deputy until I retire." And I said, "You've been good to me. I'll take a chance." And I was pretty nervous about it because my opponent had previously been a county attorney.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay.
He also had run for Congress. He'd run for the Senate, U.S. Senate.
Wow.
And I remember it was 1996, and Nelson was the sitting governor, and he was running against Chuck Hagel for the U.S. Senate. Hagel eventually prevailed. But they piggybacked me on one of their polls to just get name recognition of me and Staskowitz, and like he had 75% name recognition, I had about 35% name recognition. I said, "Oh boy, we got a problem here," and luckily I had a lot of support from the Bar Association, and some of the antics that I described kind of turned off a lot of maybe even Republican lawyers that said, "Nah, this ain't right," and we ended up beating them pretty soundly. But we spent a lot of money. I did TV ads. I mean, I'm saying, my God, I'm doing TV and radio ads for the public defender's office. And, in $96, we spent about $180,000 on everything. TV, radio, yard signs. I mean, we went to every parade. We went to every, church social and neighborhood. I mean, it was just exhausting. I've been fortunate up to this point that I haven't had an opponent since then. I've tried to maintain a good relationship with lawyers, and I'm not saying that everyone loves me out there because I know better, but I think I've managed to, especially with the alumni that we talked about earlier. They have good feelings about me and how the office is run and the people that are here. I'm planning on, if I'm not drooling on the desk, I'm up again in 24, and I'd probably like to go at least one more time. I know that gets me into the high 70s by the end, but
gets you to 50 years though too with the office, right?
Yeah.
If Trump and Biden can be president at 78, I can be public defender at 75.
There's the line of the day. Yeah.
Love that. I have one last question. You
Okay.
have an NDSU mug over there.
Uh-huh.
Are you a fan?
My son is the offensive line coach. He was at NDSU when they won 5 or 6 titles. Then the head coach from NDSU got the K-State job. My son is now the offensive line coach at K-State. So I would, on a normal Friday, I would be wearing my K-State sweatshirt here today, but I didn't think that that would be quite the appropriate attire.
YouTube wouldn't appreciate that as much.
I would, if I did, I would explain I'm doing it because my son is the offensive line coach, and that would probably give me some cover.
Right.
And of course, after last week when they beat Oklahoma, it was just exciting as hell.
Oh my gosh, that was huge.
Yeah, it was great. And when he was at NDSU, we went up to Fargo a few times, which is a nasty drive, and they were good. I mean, NDSU has 3 quarterbacks that he coached in the NFL.
Yep.
3. That's including Easton Stick from Creighton Prep. So that program was absolute dynamite, and they played FBS teams every year that he was there and were undefeated against them. They beat Kansas State the first year he was there. They were ranked in the top 15, and they went down there and beat them on the last play of the game. They beat University of Iowa, who was ranked in the top 10, and beat them on a last-second field goal. And I was at that game. It was unbelievable to see what an upset. We went to. They also played Iowa State before they played Iowa. A year before that.
But they're always playing in FBS
schools.
Place, right?
Yes. Well, Connor, it says left. It says, I love it. They pay us $750,000 to come down and kick their ass. And when Iowa State, we went to that game in Ames, and NDSU had won like 26 in a row games, and the fans were just, they give you the crappy seats when you're the visitors. You're in the side of the end zone somewhere, and the students and fans were just taunting the hell out of us. 26-1. Now you're going to play the big boys. NDSU beat them like 37-10 or something. By the middle of the third quarter, the only people left in the stadium were us, and it was funny. Now when we beat Iowa, the fans in Iowa were very gracious.
Yeah.
They didn't. The fans at Iowa State, not so much.
Interesting. So Cyclone fans.
They were much more aggressive than the Iowa fans. So I've gone down to a couple of the games at K-State. I went down to the Missouri game this year, and they beat them bad. I didn't go to the Tulane game where we stunk and got beat.
Tulane's they're running hot right now.
Yeah,
Anyway, so
yeah, they are. They are. So we'll see. They play Texas Tech tomorrow, which is not going to be easy. I'll tell you, Gundy, the coach of Oklahoma State, he was quoted as saying, "There ain't no layups left in this league." KU's 4-0,
Right.
And they were the
We should be,
bottom
we should
feeders.
be over in the 12 right now. That's where it's at. Right?
Well, it's different football.
Yeah.
The Big 12 is pretty offense-minded, whereas the Big 10 is grinded out. NDSU style was grinded out. I mean, they would just run the ball down your throat. While they do some of that still at K-State, you got to throw the ball. I mean, you almost have to score 38 points to win a game in the Big 12 now. And in Big 10, if you score 20, 21, 24, you got a hell of a chance of winning.
Is there anything that I missed that you want to add for the good of the order?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think
Well, thank you so much.
Sure.
Really appreciate